Welcome back again. We are going to really blow through these today. I would recommend obviously taking some time between each of these exercises, but all right, so in the last video, we went through healthy aggression, and I know right at the end, I kind of briefly mentioned escape. Dude, I just had like a fucking brain like did I say mentioned or mensch? Escape. Jesus. Wow, that was weird. Do you ever have that where you just had like a brain, like my brain just glitched? Okay, yeah, so we just went through aggression, fight, right? The fight response, which is what the push hands exercise and the back-to-back exercise does. Now we're kind of moving into natural escape. And when we talk about natural escape, we have to talk about anxiety to a degree. So when we've been traumatized, now again, this is the work of Peter Levine. This is a 12-part series. This today, self-somatic exercises, is part 8. All right. So when we have been traumatized, this is just a little context. It's often because we find or have found ourselves in situations from which we could not escape. Our natural flight response was thwarted or overwhelmed. This leads to a feeling of being stuck and frightened, a pervasive feeling for traumatized people in many areas of life. Think about how many times you have heard your friends or other people, or how many times you yourself have felt like periods in your life where you felt particularly thwarted, overwhelmed, stuck, where you were really kind of like spinning in that anxiety, right? This is good news, because if we're noticing these things, then guess what that means? We can decode them. We can understand what it is, and we go, oh, this is the flight response. This is something in my body that's telling me to escape. And I'm going to tell you something. Before we even get into the rest of this, I was working with somebody, and you know who you are, and they had some things happen around the property of their home being kind of invaded. And there was this kind of anxiety that would come up at night. There were other factors to the situation, but one of the things that I would do with this person, or one of the things we came up with together in session, was to imagine them actually being able to run and get out of the property. Now, you may not understand, and maybe you do, but like when we're imagining something, we are engaging all the systems in our body. So it's not just like, oh, I'm just imagining it happening. Like the body's actually responding to that. And if we have an incomplete flight response, when we start to get into that image channel and we start to feel our arms and our legs, we can actually complete that response. So, and it actually helped. The point of that story is that it helped, and it depotentiated the energy, and the anxiety went away. And eventually what happens is that then we stand firm, right? That's when we start to come back. The energy pours back into the body, and then we get to be present and here and stand firm in our own authority. We're not running these anxieties or these shutdowns, or right, the thwarted fight response or the thwarted flight response. So by the same token, if in the past you were froze when you threatened, in all likelihood, you'll freeze again in the future when confronted with an activating situation, such as an argument or intimate encounter. Think about people that have gone through sexual abuse or any type of physical violation, right? That can come up for intimacy in people, where their body freezes or dissociates when they have sex with their partner. It's very common. Let's see, where was I? Or an argument, right? Like that shutting down that I mentioned in the last video, where I had my back up against the fridge. So this sense of immobility can lead to a pervasive dread of the future. On the other hand, if you feel confident that you can escape when threatened, that feeling of dread begins to dissolve. You no longer feel overwhelmed, And this exercise is designed to give you a sense of your ability to escape when necessary. I just had another memory pop into my mind. I was at a retreat as a volunteer, and I was working to train I wasn't training on soul retrieval, but I was overseeing the people who were being trained on soul retrieval. And I was watching these two partners, and I think they were like partway through the exercise or partway through the process. And the one person started to feel so unsafe. It was the client. And she had this impulse, and this was before I even had my somatic training. And she had this impulse to like get away from the practitioner, to just like get away. And it was part of the actual trauma itself that they were diving into, that they needed the soul retrieval for. And so I just said to her, because the person didn't quite know what to do, I was like, go. I was like, run. And she got up and she went, and she like kind of went off into the field. Several minutes later, she came back. That energy had been depotentiated, and she was like, I'm so glad that you told me to run, to follow that impulse, because it completed that response. And then that was part of the healing of the experience. So, okay. Let's get into the exercise for renegotiating the flight response. Okay, I just want to wave to a couple of you guys really quick, say hello. I see some of my I see Nicole on here, Lauren. Yeah, thanks guys for being here. So, all right. Sit in a comfortable chair. Let's get ready, right? We're going to do this exercise together. So either come back and watch this later, or do this with me, or watch it while you're driving and try to do part of it, which is what I've heard people as well. Hi, Ignited Warrior 1. Sit in a comfortable chair with a sturdy foam pillow under your feet, or a pillow, just a pillow under your feet's fine. And ground yourself. Should I grab a chair, you guys? I'll do it. Come on. Let me go full on. I'm like sitting on the floor right now, but let me not flash you. Okay. Okay, let's do it. I know you guys probably can't see the floor here, but I do have some pillows. So sit in a comfortable chair with a sturdy foam pillow beneath your feet and ground yourself. Close your eyes and imagine that a fierce baboon is chasing you. Feel the strength in your legs. Feel the strength in your legs as you make running movements on the pillow. Remain mindful of your legs and body as you do this. Run until you reach a safe place on top of a boulder. You have escaped. The baboon loses interest and wanders away. Sit on the warm rock and allow yourself to settle. Notice your breathing and heartbeat. If you begin to shake and tremble, simply allow it to happen. You can also imagine other situations, present or past, where you wanted to run and felt that in some way you were prevented. So where you wanted to run, but you felt like you were being prevented from running. When you have that image, you can experience your running response, right? Like on the chair with the pillow. I suggest, though, that before you do this, you think about a safe place or person that you would want to run to. Again, it is good to have someone whom you trust to sit in the room with you. So, let's think about scenarios, like common scenarios, where a person may have a flight response that was thwarted. So I mentioned something like sexual abuse, inescapable attack, somebody, like maybe you have had an encounter with a bear or something like that. Now, I want to be clear that just because you have an experience where there is a desire to run or escape doesn't necessarily mean that you will end up with PTSD around that thing, so long as it's negotiated in the moment. So like, if you get hit by a car and you are informed about this stuff, you can make sure that you don't have PTSD. This is why I really am so passionate about sharing this information, because there's a lot of situations where people are getting PTSD and it's totally unnecessary, right? Like if we had EMTs, if we had surgeons, anesthesiologists, whatever, like people who at least come to the scene of these traumatic scenarios, if they knew that there are certain sequences that the body is trying to complete, we wouldn't, and we strap people down, we give them Thorazine, right? There's ways that we kind of prevent those things from happening. So like I was saying with the bear, somebody might have an encounter like that, but then later, like right after, kind of process that shock, let the body shake. Maybe they kind of naturally go through a running response, and you're not going to end up with PTSD. But what I'm saying is that if you have a sense of anxiety that seems to be ever present, if you feel yourself stuck, this is an indication that the flight response was thwarted. And so one thing I want to mention is that if it were true that simply running would renegotiate a thwarted flight response, then every time that you ran, you would be completing incomplete trauma responses. But that's not how that works. And this is why we would probably do this in some type of an activated state, right? We're noticing the anxiety. We're noticing something within the physiology that's tying us to that timeline. Does that make sense? So it's the same way with soul retrieval. We need the physiology to actually be in the same state that it was originally in order for us to go back in time, in order for us to complete that response, whether you're talking about soul retrieval or somatic experiencing. So like other scenarios could be something like surgery, and it doesn't necessarily mean it will be flight, right? Fight could I would actually say that probably fight with surgery is going to be more likely that there's aggression, because the anesthesia puts you into a state of that immobility. Other things like, fights, right? Think about kids being bullied. Somebody tried to come after you and, beat on you or something. There's a lot of different situations. Maybe you guys can put in the comments so that it can start to jog people's memory of a scenario where you feel like you might have had an inescapable attack or a feeling that you wanted to run. There was one other example I wanted to give. Okay, so I almost drowned in the ocean when I was in California not that long ago. And I just want to give this example because it's related to the nervous system, and then I'm going to close out this video, or I guess, actually, I said in the last video I would read comments and I didn't. My bad, guys. So let me just tell you about this little experience in the nervous system. I basically almost drowned. Like, the ocean is very wild. You have to respect her. And I will say, I know this is a little unrelated, but so I had reclaimed a big portion of my sexual energy, and the mother, the water, the holy mother waters, like, I got a little taste of why it's so important to respect that energy. I really believe that that's part of why that whole initiation happened. But okay, so basically I got taken out. It was high tide. I started to get taken out, and I didn't realize that there was like two cross currents happening. And so I was getting hit from waves on both sides of me, and I started to get really disoriented because I couldn't touch the bottom of the water of the ocean. And I realized, like, fuck, like, I'm getting taken out and I don't know what to do. And I started to panic. And so I started hyperventilating, like really intensely. And I remember thinking to myself, fuck, if I panic right now, I'm going to lose a lot of energy, and I'm going to fucking die. Like, I genuinely thought I'm going to fucking die like this. Holy shit. Because I could not stop hyperventilating. And I was swimming. I was thinking, okay, swim. I remember people saying swim parallel to the shore. Don't try to keep fighting it. So I did that, or I tried to, and I was screaming at the top of my lungs, right? Which was also causing me to lose a lot of energy. And the person that I was there with was didn't realize at first what was happening. They thought I was like, hey, and I was like fucking losing my goddamn mind. And I want to say that I think people should be trained on how to fucking deal with the ocean, because we're not. And I think that's why I would have been I almost got sucked up and died. Anyway, so the whole point of this story is that when I made it onto the shore, because I have the training that I do, I was able to just feel it, right? So I immediately laid down, and my body started shaking, and I was sobbing, and I was like, great, I'm just gonna let this happen. And then that kind of stopped. And then I could actually feel myself, because I was laying down, my eyes were closed, and I could feel my arms. And if you've read In an Unspoken Voice, or you've heard certain parts of Peter talk about when he was hit by a car and he had all these years of training, he describes very similar things of what the body, kind of getting these things that click into place, parts of the memory. And so my arms were, I literally felt like I was still in the water. And it was I just kind of let that happen for a while, where I could feel myself. And then I kept orienting towards that moment where I where I could feel the bottom again. And then I started getting closer to the person I was with, so I could grab their arm and and I just kept orienting to that. And it was that's kind of what we're doing, right? We're moving the tape forward. And this is, in this example, right, of natural escape and anxiety and this trying to run, when he says, let's see, run until you reach a safe place on top of a large boulder. You may also imagine other situations, present or past, where you wanted to run, but you felt that in some way you were prevented. But it says, again, I want to suggest that before you do this, you find a safe place or person to orient to. That's because this is a timeline that we're working, and we want to start to bring the consciousness into that moment where we did make it out the other side, right? So then and that kind of happened. My body kind of played that out, I think 3 or 4 times before it finally landed. And I was like, okay, that's complete. I made it. I touched the bottom. And then it was slowly I stopped feeling like I was in the water, and my eyes started to open, and I kind of started to orient again. Because before I started to orient back out, I was in shock the whole time I was walking up to the shore. And then when I laid down, I was very disoriented until I started to come back out. And I'm like, okay, here we go, right? This is why I was saying it's so important. I feel for people who are on the scene of certain accidents, or to be aware of this stuff and mindful, because when a person is in shock, think about how a lot of people are handled. If they're hit by a car, somebody's going to go over, oh my God, right? The energy, the activation of the nervous systems of the people around them, because they are seeing an accident or they're seeing something horrific, can actually cause more harm, right? It's what's your name? How old are you? Where are you from? Right? And the person's fucking disoriented in shock. The best thing that we can do in those situations is to bring in a calm nervous system. If you're ever in a situation where you see a kid get knocked off their bike or something, or they hit their head, come over with a calm, hey, let's just hang out here for a moment. Let's just, right? We're going to let the body kind of integrate what that was. And you might notice a little shaking, or you might notice your arm reaching out to try to catch you when you fell off your bike. We want to allow the system to do that so we can properly reorganize, reorient, so those things don't get trapped. Okay, so just to kind of recap, right? The chair, the pillow, we're feeling that. We're feeling the power of our arms or of our legs into the pillow of our arms, the activation of our muscles. And like I was saying, probably great to practice that when we're not actively needing it, because we want to build that into the system. But do practice this in moments when you actually need it and you feel that response. Last thing I want to say is that part of being educated about this and building these structures into our system means that we're able to read the nuances, we're able to read the signals that our body is giving us in any given moment. And you'll start to be able to map these things out and know these energy signatures for yourself, and it's going to just become faster and faster. At some point this year, I am going to be doing an in-depth year-long training where I actually walk people through everything that I've been taught about somatic experiencing, voice dialogue, soul retrieval, so I can start to train others in carrying out this work. All right, I am probably going to see you in a couple of minutes for part 9, but thanks for being here. See you soon.